Hello, welcome to our Belgrade Photo Month live talks. Today we are going to talk with a Serbian photographer who is an excellent photographer, but he is not really known in Serbia yet for some different reasons. First of all, because he has living abroad. He has living out of Serbia for quite a long time. Like he will talk to us, explain to us. He has been living in London. He has living in Emirates and around there for quite long. And also because let's say he's a young photographer. Because he started with photography not when he was young. He started after. And also because he is not a lover of the social nets. Then, you know, when you have social nets, it's more easy to have a proper visibility. By the other side, he has been very good exhibitions in different cities, in different countries, in different festivals. We will talk about with him. And also, if you follow last year Belgrade Photo Month Festival, we had an excellent exhibition in the Jugoslovenska Kinoteka by Dušan Aranđelović. This person was his uncle. He was a photographer for a period of 10 years, and he shot for all the important magazines of Yugoslavia, sorry. He shot actors, everybody in this field of the cinematography. And that was what we had in the exhibition in the Kinoteka. In that case, Siniša Vlajković, with whom we'll talk today, he was curating this excellent exhibition. The result was excellent. I know that him and his family, they are fighting now to have also a book. That is not yet because, well, they are fighting for this. And well, what else to say? He is also, I mean, in his family, he was not, his uncle was not the only photographer. We will talk us about, but for more than 4 generations, we are talking about for more than 100 years, he had different members in the family who were in the photography, who were photographers, and well, with a very interesting work. I mean, they have a very interesting archive that I hope that anytime they will show to us. Then today, well, this year, we were planning to have his exhibition during the Belgrade Photo Month Festival. We wanted to show part of his work. He will talk about this part. But the point of having today here is that he will show us, let's say, a retrospective of his work. Like I said before, he started late in the photography, but he has been working a lot and with a very important work. Then, yes, he will show us a big range of his projects, and he will talk to us about. I don't need to mention, as usual, that you can leave any question that you want to ask regarding something that you are seeing in the moment, something in global about him, about his work, whatever you want, you can ask. You can leave the question here in the Facebook messages because we are seeing them, and then he will answer or during the talk or at the end. We'll see how we organize depending which question in which moment arrive, etc. At the end also, he will show us some of the commercial work that he is doing, and well, what else to say? You will see he's working. He wants to work also in his own photo book. He has a very good work, like you will see, and well, he's starting to work in this process, make selections of the projects, of the works, blah 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 blah. Well, what else to say? We'll wait a little moment, and yes. Well, yes, just please don't hesitate to make any questions like we did in the previous talks with Imre Zabog, with Ryan and Rasic, with everybody. Please feel free to make the questions that you want, and we'll be answering as soon as we can. I don't know why, but he's not in the other side of the screen. I'm going to kill him. I'm going to kill you, guy. Okay. Well, Siniša, I just introduced your work a little bit.
Thank you.
I would like to listen you, to talk, to show. I invite everybody to make as many questions as they want. Then I will be asking to you during the conversation or after. Okay, and well, now you have the microphone. Please, you can start to talk and to show us all that you want. Thank you very much. Well, sorry, Siniša, thank you very much for accepting this invitation and for being here showing your work.
You're welcome. Well, since we didn't have the opportunity to do the festival this year, then this is some kind of a replacement, I guess. So do we have an audience, or is it just you and me?
We have some, and we'll have more. And well, like everybody knows, we are recording this conversation in YouTube, in our YouTube channel, and then they will enjoy it.
Okay, so let's see. First of all, okay, let me just make a quick introduction about myself. I'm now almost 51 years old, and this year I should have been celebrating through this exhibition during the Belgrade Photo Festival, which is, in fact, let's say 30, but 25 years of like dedicated photography, which kind of shows that I, as you said, started quite late. When I was about 25, I started making some of the first images that I felt were decent. And I don't mean family photos, I mean photographs that kind of made sense and that I was happy with both aesthetically and in terms of meaning. And this happened in 1995 when I was traveling to United States. I spent a month and a half there. And I took one camera only and a few rolls of black and white film and some color film, but my intention was to start shooting in black and white, something that I already been doing for about 5 years prior, but was just not happy with the results at all. I just didn't find anything very interesting about what I was doing. But in 1995, it kind of all came together in the States. But to take a couple of steps back, as you mentioned in your introduction, yes, photography has been quite, let's say, popular in my family for a long time, going back 4 generations. My uncle was an amateur photographer around the turn of the 20th century, between 1900 and let's say 1912. He had one of those wooden cameras that just looked like a big wooden box, but that was the standard at the time. And he took this camera with him. He was a diplomat working at the Serbian consulate in Macedonia at the time, which was still under the Ottoman Empire. And he took we have some photos of when the Ottoman Sultan was coming to Skopje, and some other interesting work. And I also have some letters where he's ordering from his sisters to send him photo materials to Skopje because he couldn't find it there. And tragically, he was killed in the first volcanic war in 1912. And he took his camera with him. So when my great-grandfather went to collect the remains, he brought back the camera. So we still have it to this day, and we have the date of his death, the 12th of October, 1912, inscribed on the camera. So the next generation, my grandfather was studying in France in the 1920s, and he bought a camera, and we have a lot of photographs from that time, from his student days, and then later in his life he was an avid photographer, an amateur again, but one of those people who loved to take photos. And he had a Leica, which unfortunately my aunt lost some 30 years ago, but It was a nice Leica from the 1950s. Then my uncle, who you mentioned, he was actually a professional photographer for a decade between 1969 and 1980. And he produced some really wonderful photography mainly with a Hasselblad camera. A lot of it was portraits. He was a really great portrait photographer of Yugoslavian, let's say, actors and popular singers and so on. And we made this exhibition last year to show his work. And then there was my father also, who was, again, an amateur photographer, but always took the camera with him. And it's from him that I learned some things, not because he showed me, but because, you know, I was kind of used to looking at his photographs. And in the 1970s, he had a nice Pentax camera, and he would always buy Kodak film and develop the prints in London. And those prints were, you know, this was still in the 1970s, the Kodachrome, the warm colors, the warm tones of the Kodachrome. Those were the kind of the images that we have from those days. And that really got stuck in my mind as, for me, the standards. You know, everything that came after that with the more, let's say, natural colors, and then again, later digital and so on, it kind of lost the charm that the Kodachrome prints had. So as you will see later in my work, I think first when I started doing color photography, I kind of, I wasn't planning on it, but when I was looking at the images, I felt that they needed a bit more contrast, that they needed a bit more warmth. So I would just kind of push the contrasts up, and only a few years later, I thought, I realized that maybe what I'm doing is trying to make Kodachrome prints from digital files, but without using filters, you know. So this kind of is where I'm at in terms of, let's say, about 30 years ago, when I felt that I wanted to do a bit of photography of my own. For some reason, I actually didn't go into color first. I went into black and white, and it was still film cameras. And now we're coming back to where we left off with 1995, the trip to the States.
Yeah, sorry, I wanted to ask you, on that period when you start, you were in Belgrade, or where you were?
I was living in Belgrade at the time. I was, let's say, studying and then finishing my studies, and I traveled. You know, the funny thing is that I never, at that time, I was just not interested in doing photography in Belgrade or Serbia or Yugoslavia, whatever it was. It was always when I was traveling, for no reason. I don't know why, but I would only take the camera with me when I was traveling. So before 1995, I traveled to Amsterdam, I traveled to Paris, I traveled to London, I traveled to Rome, and so on. All these places, Budapest, I always took black and white film. But like I said, wasn't very happy with the results. So when I went to America, I had only been there very briefly when I was 13 years old. But the way I remember, you know, America was from the films, from the 1970s, you know, and the TV series. So I was kind of expecting to see America the way it was when I was watching those films when I was a kid. And so when I took this, the camera and the black and white film, and I got there, and all I was looking for was the remains of that world, in the sense that, you know, anything that I could find that looked like it was from the 70s, I would photograph it, and some other things as well. But this is what preoccupied me, and I have to say that at the time I really wasn't thinking about it too much. You know, there was just something driving me to look for those things, but it wasn't pre-planned or anything like that. So maybe now we can start with.
I just want to say that I think that the cinema, that is a fantastic art, is making a lot of pain, because a lot of us, or Europeans, let's say, when we go to the States, we are expecting to see the States that we watch in the movies, in the classical movie from the 70s and 80s. And okay, thanks God, somewhere you can find still the traces of this time. But it's not always like this.
Yes. It's not. It's getting more and more difficult. But you know, when I was read
about Wim Wenders, how he also had this fascination since he was a kid about this, what is basically called Americana. You know, it's everything that is associated with America, usually through films or through photography or through even comics and things like that. This is what Americana. So Wenders was also, if you look at his photography, especially from the 1980s and so on in America, it was, and his films like Paris, Texas, and so on. It was all like reminiscing the America that he saw in the movies. So
well, the colors in Paris, Texas are quite well. Who forgot the woman with the red coat? You know, these colors.
Well, this was what was her name? Nastasia Kinski. You can
yes, exactly. Yes. Okay, I leave you now the screen. You can start to present your work and to talk us about. I remember everybody, whoever, if somebody has a question, any kind of question, technical, curiosity, if anyone wants to buy a photo of Siniša, don't forget, you can write it in Facebook and I will communicate with him.
Okay, so let's start quickly with just this. Okay, just setting up right now.
Yes.
Can you see my desktop?
Yes.
Okay, I just wanted to show everyone just a couple of examples of this color photography. This was Belgrade from the 1960s. I found this photo just online today, but you can see that the saturated colors and the warm overtones, same as this. This is also Knez Mihajlova Street in Belgrade in the 1960s. And one photograph that really grabbed my attention and kind of gave me a direction, even though I didn't know who it was by, or I didn't even spend much time looking at it, was this one by William Eggleston.
Yeah.
And I remember in London one day passing by a bookshop that specialized in photography, and something caught my eye, and I stopped and I went back and I saw this image, and I just remember I didn't even go in to see who it was. You know, didn't even go in to see the book. I just looked at it in the window, and I thought to myself, well, you know, if I ever do color photography, I want it to be something like this, you know, something with this kind of sunlight, and the colors and these cars, which I loved because I could only see them in the movies. You couldn't see them in Europe at all.
Yeah.
So that was something that was like a decisive moment for me.
For me, it's a typical California sunset somehow.
Yes, even though it was probably somewhere around where he lives, which is like I can't remember, but it was the south. Anyway, so now we come to the Americana series, and let me just spread this out so that it looks nice. So yeah, a few of these, I will only show a few, but this is the kind of New York that I remembered from the 1970s, from the movies, you know, full of all, you know, signage and these murals and so many things going on, like an urban jungle, you know, the way it's probably the best way to describe it, an urban jungle, people and everything, but signs everywhere, you know, advertising, all this. And so yeah, so I started taking photos like this, and this one was from Chicago, and there's even a funny message, you know, happy sweet 16th from mom and dad. Yeah, a lot of this stuff is really, really interesting, and it's all gone now. I think I mean, I haven't been back to America for a few years, but it's become so corporate that there's very little of this kind of creativity, spontaneous creativity left. And again, you know, these were the kind of cars, and you will see them later more because I had some kind of a fascination with them. They're ugly, but you know, beautiful in their ugliness.
Let me ask you: is only the aesthetic? Because for me, like you say, for me, I prefer more. Also, when we talk about vintage cars, I prefer more the aesthetic of the European ones. But they have something. Probably is this reminiscence of the past more than the aesthetic in itself.
Yes, of course. You know, like I said, I could only see them in the films. For European roads and cities, they were too big, and they consumed too much petrol, usually 20 plus liters per 100 kilometers, whereas European cars would go for like 10, 11. So they were too expensive to run. There were no spare parts, and you need like 2 parking spaces, which is impossible to find. 2 parking spaces together. So you just couldn't see them, and they were just in the movies. And even when I went to the States in '95, there were not very many left because things have changed already. So yeah, so you will see them more. When I went to the Middle East later, I was looking for these things. Okay, and then we have this kind of it's almost like a series within a series. It's the American obsession with religion, all kinds of denominations, especially of Christianity, and sectarianism, and just all these like groups going around and visiting some places that for some reason had some deeper meaning and so on. So this is one of those buses that brought a group of tourists. I think this was from Washington D.C. And
sorry, this is a touristical bus?
Well, it was. I wouldn't say it was for tourists. I think it was a group of people from outside of Washington who probably belonged to some kind of a church or some kind of a Christian sect, and so they came as a group to Washington. And I waited for them to leave the bus and to lock it, and I because I just loved the sign. It was so fantastic, so I took it. And this image is something that at the same time I love it and I regret the fact that it failed, but it just shows how it takes time and it takes a lot of skill, and it takes a lot of practice to get things right, because I had only one left on film. I didn't have another film, and I saw this guy dragging this cross a couple of days before that, and I didn't have the camera with me, and I thought, oh, I missed it. Well, I wish I had the camera. And then 2 days later, I had the camera with me and I saw him, and so I ran after him. I ran to the other side of the street and I tried to get a good image, and in fact everything got in the way. The car got in the way, the other guy got in the way, but it's still a nice photo, especially if you look at the expression in the faces of the women on the left.
Yeah.
It tells you everything. It tells you everything. But it's an image that I really love, and even though it's not perfect, but it was one of those things that when you're a beginner, that things like this happen, but you don't have to throw away everything that you've done.
Wow, pure street photography.
Sorry?
Pure street photography. Let me ask you, what was doing this guy with the cross? Because I can understand that you catch him one day because he's transporting the cross from one altar to another, but and also, sorry, at the end of the cross, there is like a small trolley with the wheels with a suitcase there?
Yes. Well, this is the kind of thing that you see. I mean, at least at the time when because I went to, I spent some time in New York, I spent some time in Chicago and in Washington, D.C., and in some smaller places. Well, but in the big cities you could see these like religious fanatics who are almost like in a world of their own, and sometimes they stand on the corner and they have a microphone and an amplifier, and they just talk something like some passages from the Bible, or they tell the passersby that they have to repent and that God will forgive them, all these kind of things. So this is one of these types of people. Okay. But I think at the same time it's very symbolical what he's doing. It's almost like the road to Golgotha, like he's carrying the cross. The only thing is that, Jesus didn't have wheels. He didn't have, this kind of equipment to carry it, but this guy is just dragging it. And I think what he has at the back is like some kind of a speaker and an amplifier, and he has a message on the top. It says, "Jesus loves you." Okay. So at the same time, he's when he's not talking, he's going around and he's still spreading his message, whatever his message.
Well, obviously, just seeing him is an advertiser of what.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think it's a really interesting image, and it has a deeper story to it. And I will end with a selfie, with self-portrait. I just wanted to kind of have a photo of myself in this New York environment, and I had this T-shirt with. This was an album by Lou Reed, which came out, I think, a few years before that. It was called New York, and the T-shirt was actually from one of Lou Reed's concerts, and I kind of I wanted to get this picture of myself with the New York on the back. But so, I mean, there are more pictures, but obviously I want to move on. And
of course,
a lot of them I lost because I lost the negatives and I didn't make the prints. And some of them I have small prints, and I have to find a way to scan them well enough so that they can be blown up without. I mean, they're all quite grainy, but it gives it that, you know, there's a certain value to that, because it feels like something that's quite old. It's 25 years old. Okay, so this is the first series. So what happened after that was I moved to. Let's stop sharing for the moment.
Yeah.
I finished my studies. I started working in as a graphic designer, and mingling with real photographers. At the time, I was just somebody who liked to take photos, but I didn't really. But I started working as an artist, working with professional photographers, and I realized, yeah, you know, this is it's a profession. It's quite there's a lot of technicalities involved, and especially when you're doing advertising photography, you have to find ways to translate somebody's creative idea. Sometimes not with one image, but by combining several images, and you have to find ways to, you know, envision it in your head before you start shooting. And it all seemed so complicated to me that I thought, okay, this is not something that I want to, you know, do in my life. But it's nice to be around photographers and talk about photography, you know. And so I moved to London in '99 and got a job there as art director in advertising, and I started just shooting around London with a film camera again, but with color films. I was interested in graffiti and things that were on the walls, and all kinds of, you know, as a art director, graphic designer at the time, I was interested in typography and found typography and torn posters and all these kind of things that you see on the walls. And I started making collages out of them, you know, using these photographs as almost like ingredients, and I would mix them up or take certain sections and create literally like a digital collage. And this went on for a couple of years. So photography, that was almost like a tool. It wasn't a means to an end in sense, in an artistic sense. I wouldn't use the photographs themselves. I would use elements from these photographs, and I would create something that it was more like some kind of graphic art. And it was, you know, it was early days, still early days of Photoshop. It was like around 99, 2000, 2001. And I was quite happy with this work, and exhibited in a like a group show in London and so on. And I thought, yeah, you know, I'm doing some nice creative work. This is really good. I'm gonna, you know, continue doing this. Wherever I travel, I will take photos. And then in 2002, I got a job offer in Beirut, in Lebanon. And at that time, I just didn't know much about Beirut, except that it was in the news when I was young, in the 70s. There was a war, and it was always in the news, and it was always horrific, you know, bombs blasting and people killed and women screaming. And yeah, so when I got this offer from Beirut, I thought, you know, well, do I really want to go there after all the wars in Yugoslavia? But one of my friends who had been there, he said, no, it's peaceful. You know, the war ended back in the 90s, and things are really picking up, and, you know, people are nice, and you should go and at least do an interview. So I went, and it was August 2002. I went for the interview and spent a week there. But it took me like 5 minutes to realize that I was in the right place. You know, just as soon as I got out of the taxi into my hotel, and then out of the hotel for a walk, and I thought, whoa, this is really
nice. You know, it's a Mediterranean place, and it reminded me in a strange way. It reminded me of Belgrade, and so I spent in total 2.5 years there working in advertising. But it took me almost a year before I started taking photos. For some reason, I wasn't happy with the film cameras anymore. I never had a good camera. And so I was looking to get a digital camera that was not too expensive, but it was decent. And my wife got me one, which was a nice Sony camera. It was at the time 5 megapixels. And so around, let's say, August, September 2003, after a year spent in Lebanon, not taking a single photo, but doing a lot of walking and a lot of observing, I took this digital camera and started walking, you know, around the streets. And I kind of already had an idea of what I wanted to do, but it wasn't crystal clear. So I started taking photos. And now when I look back, within the first, let's say, 3 or 4 months, so that's the last few months of 2003, so my best work came out just like that. But again, funnily enough, because I was treating it as some sort of a personal kind of thing, I wasn't sure where I was going with it, and whether there was some sort of a pattern or whether it was just completely random images. Because I was shooting a lot, you know, especially weekends, I would shoot 50, 60 images and come back and look and select 1 or 2 and then go again. And so after a few months, I realized that, yes, you know, there are some good images, but I still didn't start showing them around. So instead, what I did was I started researching into color photography, and I discovered some of the photographers that I had up to that point never heard about, like Stephen Shore, like William Eggleston, like Joel Sternfeld, and a few others. I started looking at their work and thinking, well, you know, what I've been doing the last 3-4 months kind of speaks the same language. I'm not comparing it in terms of quality or anything like that, but I could understand that there's you know, there's some sort of an understanding between my images and the images that I was looking at. So this kind of encouraged me to keep going. And I think it took me about 6 months before I started showing the work to other people, usually the people who worked with me. So these were people who were visually quite, let's say, savvy, you know, designers, art directors, creative directors, even photographers. No, photographers I started showing later, and I started getting really good comments from them, you know, and I felt almost like, well, they don't know that I've only been doing this for just a little while, and I just kept going. And the next 1.5 years that I spent in Lebanon, I managed to build up quite an interesting body of work. And I made a few trips to Syria at the time, which was peaceful, to Damascus, about 5 trips to Damascus, and did some more photography there. And by 2005, when I was leaving Beirut, I already had some 20 to 30 images that I was happy with. And just before I left, I talked to a journalist, a guy who was working for one of the top, let's say, kind of fashion and culture magazines at the time. It was called Aishti. And I showed him the pictures and I said, would you want to publish any of this? And he really liked the images a lot. And he said, well, why don't you write an article about your experience and we'll select a couple of images. And so this came out when I already left. And sadly, they only used 2 images, but they put my, you know, photo of me like big, which I didn't want. And they put the photos that I actually wanted to show small. But it was the first time, you know, any of my work got published. And so from Beirut, I left. I went to Dubai. I moved to Dubai, working for the same agency, BBDO, that I worked in Beirut. So it was like a smooth transition. and I continued working on photography in Dubai. But now I was looking for the same kind of things that I was looking for in Beirut and in Damascus. And I will show you now this body of work.
Please.
Because the reason why I mentioned Dubai is because it went on, it continued for another couple of years until 2008. And so I've kind of rounded this off into a series that I called Time Regained. Now, why Time Regained? Because, well, this is the title of Marcel Proust's book, which was the last volume in his In Search of Lost Time. I don't know, I can't remember how many, 12 parts it had. This was the last one. And it just felt right because it was time that I found, that I regained, that I kind of got back. Time that I lost when I was a child in the 1970s, and I found it again some 25, 30 years later. So let's go with
yes,
with the images. Just give me a second to spread this a little bit. This was one of the first images that I took with this digital camera and that I was really happy with. And I took it from the window of my office in Beirut. And what does it show? It shows the American car from the 1970s, but it also shows all the imperfections of Beirut, the spontaneity, which is what I loved about it, because it was a city that was, a lot of it was demolished during the Civil War, and then it was kind of being rebuilt again, but you could see the remains, they were there. I mean, you kind of lived in a city that kind of was moving forward, but it was stuck in the past, simply because there was not much going on during this 17-year war. Things were kind of, they stood still. And this is what fascinated me, because this is what I said, after 5 minutes, I felt at home. I felt like somebody took me back to the time when I was a child.
But let me tell you, when you talk now about it, it's like if I told you about Belgrade. I mean, I understand that you feel at home, and I understand that it reminds you of Belgrade, because for me, Belgrade is absolutely a place for improvisation somehow. We don't need to talk about the buildings that are still destroyed by the NATO from the 99. You know, I mean, it can remind, except that the cars, we don't have this kind of cars, but I can imagine a bit the atmosphere. And we have to say that, of course, Belgrade was the capital of Yugoslavia, who was also a Mediterranean country.
Yes, it was. Yeah. Well, you will, as you will see, through this body of work, there are a lot of parallels that I drew in the beginning subconsciously, but then I began to realize that, well, this makes sense because I found this in Yugoslavia, for example, like this kind of political establishment with the posters of the leaders on the streets. We had the communists, we had Tito, we had Marx and Engels and Lenin, big posters, and in Lebanon they have their own leaders, and also the religious aspect of it. Yugoslavia had Catholicism, Orthodox Christianity, and Islam as the three main religions, whereas Lebanon has 17 official religions, but the main ones obviously are Sunni and Shia Islam and Maronite Christianity. Maronites are, it's a Catholic sect, let's say, which can only be found in Lebanon and certain parts of Syria. And they have the Druze, which is a sect of Islam. But let's say these three are the main. And so you will see now how that comes into play when I remember my childhood in Yugoslavia. Okay. Yeah, here we go. So this was taken also in 2003, right at the beginning, maybe a month after I started working with this digital camera. And what you see here on the right is a picture of Prime Minister Rafiq Hariri, who was assassinated in 2005. So this was about a year and a half before his assassination. And what I found interesting in Beirut is that, the whole city is divided into small, let's say, quarters. And those quarters are kind of religiously, let's say that people of the same religious sect kind of live within a block of streets. And so they have their own political leaders. And so they have the posters. But what I really liked, about this fact is that, for example, when we had in the 90s, when we had elections in Yugoslavia, in Serbia at the time, the posters would be torn every day. Like, people would put the posters up, the next day they're gone, or people would just scratch them or tear them. But here, no, everything was in place. Everybody respected each other's, leaders. So they would not draw a mustache, they would not tear it, they would just leave it. They would be standing there for a long time. So that's an interesting aspect of it, like the political iconography. And then there's this whole aspect of, the fishermen and the siesta, the afternoon, just sitting there doing nothing. And you see a lot of this all over the Mediterranean, but it's something that I always like. But as a composition, I think this image works very well. It has a lot of layers, it has a lot of details, and you can keep looking at it and always find something new. This was also taken in 2003 in Beirut. It was one of those very fortunate moments when I saw this woman come out on the balcony. And what I saw, the first thing I saw was these orange, they looked like some sort of long underpants. Yeah. And she came out, and I took this image, but what it really shows is, and this is the title of this image, is Pietà, which is the famous work of Michelangelo with the Virgin Mary holding Christ, and she also has a veil on her head, and it's almost an identical posture, the head slightly tilted, and with that veil, and but obviously at the time when I took the photo, I didn't know that she would be in that position at the time when I pressed the shutter. So when I got home and I looked at it, and I thought, wow, this is almost like as if I planned it.
Yes.
And several years later, when I had an exhibition in Bologna, in Italy, and I had an artist talk, and people came up to me, Italians, and they would say, well, how did you manage to get that Pietà? Because it exactly. Resembles it so much. And I thought, well, it's just a very lucky moment. But what I was looking at was the whole scene, and the fact that she just happened to be in that position at the time when I pressed the shutter. It's pure luck. But you get some of this from time to time if you're persistent enough. But again, you see these dilapidated walls and the spontaneity of everything. Yeah. Everything is just, there's no order, but there is like harmony within all the elements.
Yeah.
And
there is no proper order, but everything works.
Yes, exactly. And this is what that part of the world for me is about, especially that Levant area, which is Syria, Lebanon, and Jordan, where I really love going every time, because there's so much spontaneity and everything somehow fits in perfectly, even though it's not perfect at all. Uh-huh. This image was taken in Beirut, I think early 2004. I was walking around, and there were still some buildings that were semi-demolished from the war and just left empty, and people moved out. So you can just walk inside and look around. And I walked into one of these apartments, and I found somebody's bedrooms, like a kid's bedroom.
Yeah, I suppose for the football poster.
Yes, and there's a poster of a football team, and then there's a poster with the horses. And again, this really shows you the remains of somebody's life. It was probably a happy life spent there, and then suddenly the war started and bombs started falling, and they had to leave.
Yeah.
And they never came back.
So there's a deeper story to it.
Of course.
This is one of my favorite images of everything I did in the last 25 years. Again, it shows the American Cadillac car, but just the setting is just incredible. It was a parking lot which during the day is full of cars, but on weekends, because it's like an area where there's a lot of offices, so everybody leaves, and then this car was always there. And again, if you look at the walls and if you look at all the cables, like the cables everywhere, and you know, this is one thing. Another thing that fascinated me about Beirut is that all the cables, the electrical cables, are always hanging from the walls and above people's heads, and even the fuse boxes are out on the street. So you know, you could literally switch off somebody's electricity just by you know, unscrewing a fuse.
Yeah.
Because it's outside, it's on the street. You can just walk and, you know, turn off the switch and no electricity in the house. But it's fascinating. Nobody does that, of course, you know.
But you know, again, for me, it's like if I am seeing Belgrade. Belgrade is full of these wires, and then suddenly there is something in the photo, in the center of the photo, that you have this part of the wall that is randomly, probably painted in white. It looks like if they're testing how this white is, you know, like you make a test for painting how. But if I look through my window downstairs in the big terrace that is downstairs, one day they start to paint a part, and it looked like this. I don't know why they did it, but they just start and stop and todo. It reminds me very much the wildness of at least Belgrade.
Well, that's the whole. That's the same spontaneous spirit. You know, you do something and you just leave it, and it stays there. Nobody touches it anymore.
But it's beautiful. It's beautiful.
Thank you. Okay. Next one, yeah, this was another series that I did, and I did a few especially in Damascus. There were a lot of these family-run shops that have been owned by 2-3 generations, and they reminded me of small grocery stores from the 1970s from Yugoslavia, which here we called the Piljarnica. And the only difference is that, you know, nobody ever put the pictures of their father or grandfather, but over there, and like I said, especially in Syria, they always have these pictures of deceased family members. And this one was obviously originally black and white, and then it was hand colored, which was especially popular in the 1960s, I think. And in Egypt also, in Cairo, there was a whole school of this hand coloring of black and white images. But this whole, you know, if you look at just a section, if you look at a section of this shop, it just blends in really well, you know, with all the products and even this advertising probably from the late 80s or the early 90s.
Yes.
And, you know, it's like time stopped, and this was 2004. So it felt like going back to the 1970s. Okay, and this is a kind of, I call them idiosyncrasies, you know, things that are really very specific for that region, just people displaying whatever they, you know, it's almost like their little world on display for everyone to see. This was taken in a taxi, and the taxi driver just puts this, you know, on the dashboard, and everyone has something on the dashboard, either hanging from the mirror or on the dashboard, and it's almost like a little window into their intimate world. What is it that they like? Maybe it's the kids, I don't know what it is, but it's little details like this that I always like to look for.
Yes.
Now we come back to the whole religious aspect. You know, here in Yugoslavia in the 1970s and the 80s and until the war, you know, we had Islam in parts of Bosnia, most of Bosnia, and we had it in southern Serbia, Sanjak and Kosovo and so on, and in Macedonia and so on. But the country was
predominantly Christian, either Catholic or Orthodox. In Lebanon, it's the other way around. So it's the predominantly Shia or Sunni Muslim, and then the Christians are a minority. So they feel that in some way they have to show or express their, belonging to this Christian community. So they have these either, well, this is like a little shrine inside a building. Just as you enter the building, you see this, or they have, icons of the Virgin or of Christ. And so I did a whole series of this, like Christians expressing their kind of belonging to this community. But it's always funny how you can find so many different layers, like in an image like this. Again, you have the wires, you have the dead flower, but the light is on, the candle is on.
Yeah.
And then the whole shape of this
is a real candle, or is electrical candle?
It's probably like a battery powered, like it has a little a light bulb.
Yeah,
it's probably that, and the whole shape of this structure it's the shape of a famous modernist church in Lebanon. It's called Harissa, which is on the top of a mountain, and it kind of overlooks the valley and the sea. And so this is the shape of the roof of the building. I think it was constructed it's probably designed in the 1960s and constructed in the early 70s or late 60s by a prominent Lebanese modernist architect. And so this is exactly the shape of the roof.
But like before, with the politicians, the people respect. It means nobody.
Yes, absolutely, yes. There's no way that somebody will go in like a Muslim go in and demolish that, or a Christian to go into a Muslim and tear the poster or something. No. They don't do these things. And this is a funny one. It was like a hole in the wall hamburger pizza, and it says in Arabic, it says here pizza and köfte, which is in Serbian we call çufte, which is meatballs. And this was part of like a sign that had the menu and the prices. But what I was focusing on was the icon of the Virgin and Christ, and the whole the juxtapositioning of this religious iconography with the consumer iconography represented by Coca-Cola, and pizzas and hamburgers. Okay. And I didn't shoot people very much, because I was kind of when I did it candidly. I didn't want people looking at me, taking photos of them. Not because I kind of felt that I was disrespecting them, but I was just a bit too shy, to go around pointing cameras at people. But when there was a moment that I could, catch they were not looking at me, then I would take the photo. And I just really like this one. It's just so much contrast, Again, a 70s American sports car with a conservative, Muslim family inside, and then the wheel. If you look on the on the tire, it says Rampage, which is doesn't make any sense, And then inside, if you look inside, you see the scented tree hanging from the mirror.
I wanted to tell you, because this is a classical to give, for me, disgusting smell to the car.
Yeah, it's like a muscle car,
Yes.
So it's
it's a prototype of a muscle car. Yes, and then you see in the top in the parking that all the cars are new.
Yes. Well, this is unfortunate, because if you look at 99.9% of my images, you will not see anything new.
Yeah.
But here I just couldn't. Even if I wanted to crop it, otherwise it would. I always want to work within the same format of the picture.
Of course.
So I could have cut them off, but
sometimes it happens. So this time I couldn't do anything about it. I had to take the photo at that moment, or it would be gone. You know.
Of course.
Yeah. Okay. And this is a similar kind of point of view through the window. This was in Damascus, in Syria. It was a school bus, kids going back home, and you know, in Damascus, what I found interesting was that people actually liked being photographed. So I would go around the streets with a camera, and they would invite me to photograph them. And these kids didn't do that, but they saw me taking the picture, and I just like the expressions of their faces, and I like the battered bus and the reflection, you know, in the windows of the Arabic writing, and
yes,
the composition was nice.
The faces of them, they're very nice. The two little boys just looking something else, and the other guy looking to you. Well, the other two guys in the back, the little two boys in the back. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you know, the interesting thing about these images is that most of them were like 1 out of 1. You know, it's not like I took a series, because I had a small memory card at the time, and I was very careful with, you know, the amount of images that I would take in a day in one card, because I would take them in full resolution. So I didn't want to waste any shots. So a lot of these were just like one shot, bang, and it comes out well. And even the cropping is most of them, it's the original cropping. So that was quite encouraging at the time, that, you know, right from the beginning, I could get the composition right, I could get the lighting right, I could get without any prior you know, experience or like technical knowledge.
Yeah.
This is another one that was taken in Damascus, and again, you know, the first thing I see is the car, and then I see these people, and then wait for the moment when they're not looking. And you know, there are ways to avoid people looking at you. You could just stand and what I would do is I would play around with the camera. I would just, you know, look at the camera. I would sometimes take out the battery. Sometimes just play around with it, just to give them time to stop looking at me and to go back to whatever they were doing. And and then I would have time to make the composition and to press the shutter. This one was taken in Dubai immediately when I arrived in 2005, maybe within the first couple of weeks. So I was, you know, suddenly I was shocked by how everything was new, even though I'd been to Dubai about 4 years before that. But in those 4 years, between 2001 and 2005, things changed so much. It was like a completely new city, and everything moved away from the old part of town, which was around the creek. Everything moved to where the desert was before, where everything was new. And then this kind of old part of town was completely neglected. And all the expats, all the foreigners, they moved out. And so suddenly you could find some, you know, some original spirit to Dubai. Because Dubai is not a new city. I mean, it's been at least for just over 100 years, it's been like a regional center of trade, and between Iran and India and the Middle East. And so the whole, you know, new Dubai kind of started developing from the 1950s onwards, especially from the 70s onwards, with oil, which wasn't even from Dubai, it was from Abu Dhabi. But then suddenly some, you know, capital came in, and they started to develop trade and tourism. And so Dubai is not as new as people think it is. And there are still some pockets that you can find, but I think that they're demolishing them now more and more. I mean, I haven't been back in 7 years, but this was 15 years ago, and you could still find some nice places. And what I liked about this picture was obviously the expression of the woman. She just stood there. She sat there in this pose for a few minutes. So I had time to you know, create the composition and to shoot. And this
rack with the postcards came in nicely. It's lit by a light. If you can see on the right, there's like a window. It was a shop window, and there was a light above it, but the daylight was still quite good at the time. So there's a kind of strange difference in lighting in this image.
Yeah.
But, yeah. And this is the only one from the series that was not taken in the Middle East. It was taken in Singapore, in the Indian quarter of Singapore, also in 2005. And again, it's like a microcosm. It's somebody's little world. And I took it through a window. It was the window of a photography shop. And, you know, I really liked the main picture on the wall with the guy with the video camera. But when I looked at the image later, and I started looking at all the details, then you see how rich the you know, it is in texture. I mean, if you look at the lower left corner, you can see the same guy, photos of him with a TV studio camera.
Yes, yes, I see.
With a film camera. So what he wants to say is, you know, I'm good with any format. You know, I'm like the king of, you know, cameras.
Yes.
Whatever you give me, I can do it. And then there's also this picture of his son.
Yes.
Above it, with, you know, with shorts and a tie, like school uniform. So there are a lot of nice details, and the colors and everything else. You know, it just all fits in very, very nicely. This is a different approach. I took this one in Kuwait, also in 2005. It actually reminds me of an image. I think it was just subconsciously kind of imprinted in my mind because I was walking next to this a supermarket, and there was actually like a courtyard, and I saw through the door of the courtyard, I saw the scene of a mural and all these like supermarket trolleys, and this guy praying, because it's normal to see, especially in the Middle East, to see people praying at prayer time. If they don't have time to go to a mosque, or if there's not a mosque immediately next door, they just go out in the streets and pray. And what I saw here was like subconsciously an image which I saw a few years before that. It was by a famous British advertising photographer called Nadav Kander. I don't know if you're familiar with his work.
No.
Well, he's probably the most famous advertising photographer in the last, let's say, 20 to 30 years. But he also does a lot of personal work, and he usually travels for a month or two. He did a series on America, and he did a series in China and Chernobyl and so on. And there was an image of like an empty parking lot in America with trolleys. And when I took this photo, because I didn't have time, I just had one shot and I took it immediately. And then when I looked at it later, I thought, well, this reminds me of Nadav Kander's image. But sometimes it's just subconscious, you know. You can't. And anyway, in a way, it's like an homage to something that you've seen before. This one was taken in Amman, in Jordan, in 2008. And I was on a bus with my wife, and my wife was 6 months pregnant, and I saw this scene, and I told her, we have to get off, and I have to go back and photograph this thing. Well, I didn't know what it was. It just looked like it landed from another planet. Obviously, I think it's like a kid's playground. It's something
like a kid carousel, no? Looks like.
Right?
Like a kid's carousel.
Yes, something like that. Yes. So yeah, we got off and walked back, and I took the image, and then we had to take a taxi because you know, we didn't know when the next bus would come and where we could catch it. But it's a nice, I think it's a nice image. And
it's beautiful. It's beautiful with this absolutely concrete gray background with the perfectly blue, almost white sky. No, it's fantastic.
Well, this is, Amman is completely gray. It's all concrete, but it's very harmonious. The way all the buildings blend one into another. And I will show you one more from Amman. This is it.
Okay.
So because it's all in hills, and when you stand on one hill, then you see the one on the other side, and it's all gray, and then this what I called it shocking blue, building just painted. And this was also taken in 2008. And when I was in Amman last year, I was trying to find it, and then I realized, no, it's gray. It's gone gray completely.
Wow.
It's just blended into everything else. But this was when it was fresh.
It means the ones that are yellow now that we see in the first part, probably now they're green. They're gray again. They're gray also.
Maybe yes. But I was looking for the blue building, and I could only find it by shape, but it was completely gray. So yeah. And something similar again in Beirut, and another one of those buildings that was evacuated and nobody ever went back. But the way this, you have the skyline and the horizon in line with the floor height. It was just perfect. And then of course you have the touch of red with the heart, and it really represents the winter time in this part of the world. And this is when I really liked shooting, especially January, February. Those were the times of the year when I could find these kind of colors. And this is another thing that I think came very subconsciously, that I was looking for these atmospheric conditions that produced very muted colors, so that whenever there's a detail, like for example here, this heart in this letter S, it jumps out, from the grayness and these light blue tones. It's just, comes out as a detail. And again, this is Beirut, winter time. So you get these wonderful colors, and you get the textures in the sky, the clouds, and the mist. And what really makes this picture is these three guys in the left corner. I almost missed them because I was on a cliff quite far from where they are, and I just saw them. And when I looked at the composition, I thought they have to be in there. I mustn't lose them. And this guy on the left, completely, he was already making his way out of the frame, but fortunately managed to catch him. But it's a shame, that now thinking back that these images were taken with when digital photography was still relatively young, and with a 5 megapixel camera, you can't enlarge these images. Like this one would have been great if it was big, like a landscape painting. But now the best we can do is maybe A3, and then it just becomes completely not pixelated, but so grainy that it just doesn't make sense. So this was the first, let's say, the first body of work after the American pictures that I was very happy with. And so after a while, let me just go back to the stop sharing. In 2005, when I had a few already that I was happy with and that were tested, seen by other people, and received good comments, and I made a series of postcards that were like A5, 20 by 15, something like that. And I think 18 of them I made, 500 copies each, so I still have a lot of them. And those became, like my calling cards in a way. It was the first time I printed the images and started looking at them, how they look printed, because by that time I was just digital, on screens, and suddenly they became real, they became almost like it was almost like cutting the
umbilical cord. You know, suddenly they were not mine anymore. They became, they started getting a life of their own. And then I started, you know, exhibiting the work and making larger prints. And suddenly it all started making sense. You know, everything that I was doing up to that point, it seemed like a hobby, but suddenly it became more than that. It became, you know, I was finally able to step into the art world, you know, get people interested, get galleries interested, get, let's say, a more kind of professional, kind of art world professional audience interested. And I think that's when it took off, but it took me 3-4 years to get ready to share, you know, the pictures with the world.
Where did you exhibit for the first time?
Well, the first real exhibition was in Dubai in 2010. So it took even more. It took, well, between 2003 2010, took 7 years to get a solo exhibition. It was a fantastic gallery at the time. It was called the Empty Quarter. It still exists, but it's under a completely different management now. At the time, it was managed by a Lebanese American guy called Eli Domit. And when he opened the Empty Quarter in 2009, it was the first gallery in the Middle East that was dedicated only to fine art photography. And so it was really a nice opportunity to show the work in the only and the best Middle Eastern fine art photography gallery.
Uh-huh.
And this is the work that I showed you. I showed a selection of, I think, something like 12 or 15 of those images. Do you have any questions, or should we move?
For the moment, no. There's people looking, watching, but listening, but no questions. We can go on.
Okay. You don't have any questions? Okay.
No, you know, I am not shy. When I have, I do.
Okay. So let's move to the next series, which began in 2007. I called it Substations, and you will see why. It's about a series of vernacular. This is a term that architects use a lot. Vernacular architecture. It's architecture that is created from local sources, local resources, and by local people. So no architects, nothing designed, all just kind of put together by hand.
Uh-huh.
And this little diesel station I found outside of Dubai in 2007. I was driving during the day and I saw something that I thought was very interesting. It reminded me of a film called Baghdad Cafe from the 80s.
Yes, I remember.
And it reminded me of the Route 66 petrol stations from the 50s, 60s, 70s. But when I came by night with a friend, and then it looked completely different. It looked amazing. So what happened was that I didn't have the kind of equipment. I worked always with like point and shoot cameras, never worked with professional cameras. And I realized that for a good night shot, I needed a professional camera, and I needed somebody who knew how to use the equipment properly, because I didn't know how to use it. So I managed to persuade a Dubai-based photographer who has been a great friend of mine for the last almost 15 years, Mohammed Somji. And I told him, we have to drive out and take this photo. And it took us an hour and a half, and he wasn't too enthusiastic, but we took his equipment and we arrived at the scene, and we didn't ask any permission. We just kind of set up the tripod and the camera and took a few photos, and we left. And when I looked at the photos, and I thought, well, this is perfect as it is. It doesn't need any work in terms of no brightness, no contrast, nothing. It was just good to go. Muhammad thought it was okay, but nothing very interesting. But then I started showing it to people I was working at Saatchi & Saatchi at that time, advertising agency in Dubai. And I started showing it and people really liked it. And so I started sending it out to different festivals and awards, competitions. And it won first prize in Dubai. There was a big competition organized by Corbis, it's like Getty Images now, but I think Corbis was probably bought by Getty, but it was quite a big image library at the time. They organized a competition throughout the Middle East, and this came first. And the first prize was a MacBook Pro laptop, 17-inch, which was fantastic.
What the fuck? I mean, what a good prize.
Yeah, it was great, amazing. And then I sent it to the New York Photo Festival, and it was shortlisted as a finalist. I sent it to London. There was a competition which was called Photo 8, which was really great competition. This was 2008, and it also was a finalist there. And I sent it to IPA, which is International Photography Awards in Los Angeles, a huge competition, and it was also a finalist there. And then I realized, if I could find more of these stations, then maybe I could do a series. And so it evolved, over time. Over a period of 6 years, between 2007 and 2013, Mohammed and I made more than 10 trips, always during the night. And we got quite a few of these different.
Yeah. Wow.
They were all, so the story behind these stations is that they were all owned by people who were from Afghanistan or Pakistan, and they were on roads that were not very frequently used by cars. They were usually used by trucks. And diesel trade in the UAE at the time was only, it was, okay, if you wanted to have if you wanted to sell petrol privately, you could only sell diesel. You couldn't sell any other type of petroleum. And cars were not using diesel. All cars were, what is it called, 95 or 98 octane based, but only trucks were using diesel. So basically these stations were, the customers were, truckers. And so they were built from just found material. But the nice thing was that it's almost like a subculture. It became, or at least over the years when we visited them and we talked with the people, with the owners, we realized that it's like it's like a different world, completely different, especially to the high-tech world of Dubai. Here people would fill up the trucks, and then they would sit down and spend the next half an hour or hour drinking tea with the owner of the station, and they would talk, and they would exchange show videos from weddings from Afghanistan or whatever. And it was just a very slow life, and then they would pay like once a month. They would the owner would keep like a ledger of how much petrol was bought every time, and then at the end of the month these people would pay. So it was all it's like the old world, completely nothing to do with the glitz of Dubai and Abu Dhabi and all this everything that made Dubai famous around the world. And they all wanted to stand out, especially at night, because they were usually open throughout the night. And they would add these kind of neon lights, like colorful neon lights, so that the truckers could see them from a distance. And
the person who is working there is around there.
Well, the thing is that we over time we established communication with these people, even though they didn't speak English. But my friend Mohammed, he could speak, because he was of Indian origin. He could speak this cocktail of languages like Urdu, and so they could communicate.
and we would ask these people to obviously move everything, like if there were any cars or anything, move them out of the way, and even switch off some of the lights and then maybe leave some of them on.
Okay.
So it just became, it was very difficult to gain their trust. So it took us about 10-15 minutes because they didn't know who we were, why we were interested in taking photos of these shacks, but once we would get through that, and then you have to go through the whole ordeal of having tea with them. And the funny thing is that you get a cup, but it's not a washed cup. It's like a cup that somebody else was drinking from, before, but you do it anyway. And then it takes like 45 minutes to an hour to get through that whole, it's like a cultural thing. And
Yeah.
then they are happy to do whatever you want. They will do whatever you tell them, as long as it's reasonable, as long as you don't blow up the whole station. But, they would move the cars, they would turn off the lights, they would hold other trucks coming in, until we finished. So it was amazing. And and the series grew, and we ended up with like around 12 really good images. And then when we started exhibiting them, we had a big exhibition in 2011 in Dubai, and then another one in 2012, I think, and then in Abu Dhabi last year. But the one in Dubai in 2011 they were shown as light boxes, because it was an interesting medium to use rather than print.
Absolutely, I can understand.
And we made them quite big. We made them 1 meter by 70, and we even brought some of these people, some of the owners, and they came in their traditional clothes, and it was really great. And what we also did was we made like an installation. We managed to find an old petrol pump, and we kind of made a design for it and had somebody make one. So it was like a full-scale model right there at the exhibition. So I'll show you a couple more.
Yeah.
This is the same one as the previous one, but I think about 3 years apart.
Yeah, it looks different.
Yeah. This one is nice. You see the doors on the right.
Yes.
I felt at one point that it was too dark, so I told the guys, turn on the lights and open the doors, and that creates almost like a spooky atmosphere.
Yes.
Like here, it's completely dark.
It's fantastic.
Yeah. So yeah, I think I'm showing here only 8, but 12. We had a few more, but these were the best. And then they were published in. Oh yes, we had a big exhibition in Holland at the Breda Festival in 2016. They printed 8 of these huge, like billboards, like 4 by 3 meters on the main square. Yeah. So this was very impressive, and the work was published in a book from the festival, and yeah. So this series, I think it's, even though we stopped because I haven't been back to the Emirates since 2013, and Mohammed tells me that you can't find them anymore, that they're gone. I think it has the potential to be exhibited for a long time now, because it's like it's almost like they came from a different time, even though they're quite recent.
Yeah, they're timeless somehow. Yes.
Yes. Okay, how are we doing time-wise? Is this?
Well, we are 1 hour something, but we want to see everything. Then, if you take longer, you take longer. Meantime, the people is watching, and if not, the people will watch it later by YouTube. I remind, meantime you look, that
Okay,
if somebody has a question, don't hesitate to do it.
Okay, let's move to the next series then. Share screen. Okay. And okay, so the next series kind of came about in parallel with these substations. No, so sorry, slightly later in 2011. It was it's a series of what we call in photography social landscapes, landscapes, but with a
with either a human element or an element of something that was created by people.
Humans.
Not like pure landscapes. And the entire series was created in the United Arab Emirates, but not in Dubai. It was, well, some of it, one or two from Dubai, but mainly in the smaller Emirates. You know, there are 7 Emirates in the UAE. Abu Dhabi and Dubai are the main ones, and then there's Ras Al Khaimah, and there's Sharjah, and so on. And there are 3 small Emirates. One is called Fujairah, one is called Al Quwain, and one is called Ajman. And these are the poorer Emirates. And then when you go over there, the glitz is gone and it looks very real, you know. And so I found a lot of these interesting sites next to big motorways. And, you know, the way again, the atmospheric conditions I was looking for were winter time, because during the summer, the sky is completely white. And the sun is so harsh during the day that you can't do anything. But during the winter, you get the nice muted light, and you get clouds, which you will see on some of the images. And for me, that was perfect. It was exactly the way I wanted it. And in 2011, there was the Ministry of Culture in Dubai made an open call for artists to submit proposals for artistic projects that would be shown within a festival called the Sika Festival. And there was a budget of 10,000 dirhams, which is around 2,500 euros to cover production costs. So it was fantastic, you know. And so I decided that I wanted to do a series of photos of around the Emirates and make them relatively big, 70 by 50 centimeters, and produce them nicely and frame them nicely. And so I had about 2 months to prepare. And so this whole series came about. So let me just quickly show you what's happening. This plane, I found later that it belonged to the famous Russian arms smuggler called Victor something. A film was made with Nicolas Cage called The Lord of War about this guy.
Okay.
And somehow this plane, which is a Russian, I think, Ilyushkin or something like that, somehow it found its way to the Emirates, and then it was grounded, and it served as a billboard for a nearby hotel.
I see.
Yeah, and actually it was parked on an airfield, like a desert airfield, but it had been grounded for years, and you know, I found a good moment when these people were. This was a Friday, which is the weekend in the Middle East, and you know, they were taking photos. Yeah. And so it was an interesting way to add people into the landscape.
And it looks like, if you go back to the photo, you go back to the previous photo, we have the 3 guys taking the photo, because, you know, these planes are something like quite masculine always. We like this mechanism and everything. And then you have probably the 3 wives in the back looking the sea or whatever, you know, in their own somehow.
Yes. Yeah, the men were interested in the plane, and the women were interested in something different. Yeah. Okay. But what happened at the time was that I changed cameras, and it was just one of those lucky situations where my friend, who I mentioned, Mohammed Samji, he offered me to try out a small camera. It was called Lumix GF1, and it had a fixed lens, like the pancake lens. And so when I started playing around with that camera, I realized that because of the fixed lens, I couldn't rely on zoom anymore. So I had to move back and forth. You know, I had to approach a subject, whatever it was. So it was almost like working with a large format camera. You know, you had to, but without the tripod, you had to move back and forth. You had to, what it did was invited me to create a different kind of composition, a composition that was not kind of looking at the medium range or close up. It was looking at the like distant objects. And so I began to frame everything in such a way that I would put like a big object somewhere in the center, or you know, make the story about the big object, and then I would let people walk in. So it would always be like a trap, you know, like you're waiting there, and at a safe distance, so you know nobody's looking at you taking the photos, and then you just wait for people to walk in, and you take a few images and then see which one works best. This was in an industrial zone, again on a Friday, because Fridays are perfect for shooting if you want to shoot empty spaces because everyone's resting. And this structure was I found it interesting because it had no explanation. There was nothing, no sign saying what it was about. It obviously has the like the lower part of a tank or some kind of a caterpillar vehicle, and then a monument above it, but we don't know what it looks like.
There are many tools, balls, nuts, hammer.
Yeah, and it's huge. You know, what's nice about this image is that you see how small the people are in relation to the whole monument.
And I will tell you how well it works, this photo, with the two guys passing by.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, it just felt empty without them. So I decided to wait for someone to walk in. And it took a long time because there was nobody around. And so, you know, so once I kind of got the format, I began kind of using it wherever I found something interesting. I would come on a Friday and wait for people to show up. So this was again, it was a different industrial zone in Ajman, and obviously this was some kind of a car mechanic, and he put this old Mercedes from the 1970s up there as some kind of an advertisement. So these are the kind of things that I found interesting.
Yeah.
This one was taken in an industrial zone in Dubai. It's a factory. It's like a foam factory, but what they do is they don't make foam. They make objects out of foam for commercial purposes, usually for advertising or for special events and so on. And so some of these big ones that have been used before, and now they're back in the yard. They don't know what to do with them, but they're huge. You know, like 10 meters. Warehouse. And it's just a really funny, you know, collection of items with this, I don't know, it looks like a giraffe, but it's not, and the Statue of Liberty and the plane flying overhead.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, they do whatever they need, the clients need, like probably the dinosaurs. Wow.
These two dinosaurs were going to be like part of a huge dino park, which was planned but was never realized. And so the whole area was just sectioned off with this huge hoarding, and there was a motorway behind it, and all you could see if you drove along the motorway with the heads of these two dinosaurs. So I was curious, you know, how big are they, and you know what they look, and so but I realized that the whole place was sealed off and you couldn't get in. So I had to find a hole, and you know, between the hoardings, and somehow sneak in. And then, you know, I realized that they are like life-size dinosaurs. And
I can imagine also the photo from the other side of the fence.
Yeah, I did, but I took them, but I don't know. It just didn't really work.
Okay, this is just great. They're beautiful.
Yeah, and I call this picture the Trojan dinosaurs, like the Trojan horse, because you know the Spartan soldiers, was it? No, it wasn't Spartan. It was Troy. Stupid. The Trojan soldiers were hidden inside the Trojan horse,
yes.
And they would come out during the night through a ladder, and this ladder was perfect. It was like the soldiers come out of the dinosaur. Again, something that I found next to the motorway. Again, it's huge. It's probably like, I don't know, 7 or 8 meters tall. An advertisement for yogurt, a really old one, but nobody would remove because it had a concrete base, and it just stood there for years.
Let me tell you something. All these fantastic series that you are showing, it also reminds very much the States, you know, this culture of the desert, but also this huge, insanely big, random advertisement somehow. 3D, of course.
Yes, but of course, it all ties in with the whole Americana concept. I don't think I ever left that concept. I was just moved to a different part of the world, and I continued looking for the America from the movies, you know, from the 60s and the 70s.
Yeah, but somehow is that, of course, you are attracted by that, but you went to a place that they love, they follow, or however you want to call this culture. And then, of course, it matched perfect for you.
Yes, it might sound a bit contradicting, but the Arabs love America and they love American culture.
Yeah.
And so, especially the Gulf states like Saudi Arabia and UAE and Kuwait, there's so much of it resembles America, but more like rural America. Okay, next one. This was a quirky house, again somewhere in, I think it was the Emirate of Ras Al Khaimah. And when I went back a couple of years later, the guy planted trees all around, so you couldn't see it anymore. But this one, it was just finished. You find these kind of things from time to time. Somebody just wants to do something completely differently.
Yeah.
Another interesting element, all around the UAE, you have these roundabouts because, you know, the British influence is huge over there. And, you know, the British, they like to put roundabouts everywhere. So you have roundabouts, big roundabouts, and then they have some kind of weird sculptures there. And this one was very close to the sea, and I called it the Jaws Roundabout, like the film Jaws. 3 sharks, and it was taken in the Emirate of Fujairah, which is on the east coast of the Emirates, which is the Indian Ocean, as opposed to Dubai, which is on the Gulf of Arabia or the Persian Gulf, whichever way you want to call it. But this is the Indian Ocean coast, and the whole area, it looks like you're on the moon, you know, because you have these mountains that are completely bare. You will see more later, but it's a very interesting landscape, moonscape. This one was taken in Dubai in 2006, and it really shows how, you know, Dubai moves from vision to reality very quickly.
Yeah.
And
wow.
And I call this picture under construction.
Wow.
Next up, this is what I was telling you about the textured skies, and it's rare that you get rain, you know, but you get it only during the winter, and sometimes when it pours, you have to run for cover because it's like, you know, the sky opens up and tons and tons of water just come down, and it just ends in like 15 minutes. But then you get water everywhere, and you get these amazing skies, you know, the muted colors again, but with the nice textures. And then when you have these bright reds against the sky, it really jumps out.
Yes.
Indian nightclub, yeah. This was taken on the same day, like within 10 minutes. And it's funny because this wall actually hides the coast. The coast is probably about 100 meters behind us, a parking lot. And you almost get like a picture of what you will see when you go behind that wall. Obviously, an idealized picture.
I imagine. I don't want to mention the deception that you can have as soon as you cross.
Yeah. And this is the last in this series, but there's obviously more. Again, in Fujairah, the moonscapes in the background. This was a picnic area from the 1980s, and it just wasn't used very much. And again, it was taken on a Friday morning, so when everybody's sleeping or at home, they usually come out on Friday, like families come out on Friday afternoons. They do picnics, but in the mornings they're all at home, and it's just really, really interesting structures. You know, the metal structures that there for at least 20 years, if not more.
I love this photo. I love this kind of like social landscapes or landscapes with this, that you can feel this loneliness and at the same time this decadence of the time and the time that it passed and everything is fucked up.
Yes, you always have the in my photos you always have this the passage of time, you know.
Yeah.
Something that this is why I wanted to call my retrospective, which I was hoping to do this year, but it's not going to happen. Anachronicals, which is it's a neologism, like it's a new word coined from two words, anachronism and chronicles. So all these pictures are anachronisms because they were taken relatively recently and they're showing time that passed 30, 40 years ago. And at the same time, it's like a chronicle of an account of events that happened. But these are like silent reminders of some other times that occurred. Yeah, and this series, by the way, is entitled, it has a Latin title called Genius Loci, which again architects use a lot, and urban planners, and it stands for like the or let's say the pervading spirit of the place, something that is not tangible, but you can feel it. Once you're in a place, you feel its spirit. And this is what I wanted to capture. I wanted to capture a special kind of mood, special spirit of these locations. And so this series was exhibited that year, and then many times again in different countries. Those pictures were taken between 2011 and 2012. So what happened in 2013 was I decided I had enough. After 10 years in the Middle East, I wanted to come back to Europe. I came back to Belgrade for hoping to stay maybe a couple of years and then move on again somewhere else. But I ended up staying here for 7 years. And now with everything that's happening, we don't know where we can go again or when. So let's see. But when I came back in 2013, I wanted to do something different. I mean, kind of stay on the same course within the same idea of projecting, you know, the time of my childhood in today's world. But I found it very difficult because things had changed so much. And you know, while I was in the Middle East, I was projecting the country of my birth in a different geographical space. But now when I came back here, there was nothing to project except for maybe projecting Middle East here. But it didn't work. The other thing that didn't work for me was the color palette. You know, I got used to working with these, especially during the winter months, with these nice muted colors. I did, well, two palettes. One was the kind of bluish gray and the color of sand, and the other one was the, let's say, the red earth and again the darker yellow colors of the sand. But then suddenly here I was hit like almost like with a hammer on the head with the greens, and I just didn't know what to do with them. And to this day, I haven't solved this problem. The only way is to shoot during the winter, but during the winter it's too gray. Everything's gray, and so aesthetically, I have a problem there, which I wasn't able to solve. And the greens I absolutely hate in my photography, and I hate the blue skies, the deep blue skies. I don't hate them in everyday life. I just hate them in my photography. So let's see what I managed to.
Yes,
do.
please.
Okay. So going back to the political iconography, I found this on the Serbian-Bulgarian border in 2013. There was a...
Sorry, we're not seeing yet, at least.
Oh, maybe because I didn't share the screen. Okay, 1 second. Maybe I didn't press the... Okay, yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah, so this was taken on the border between Serbia and Bulgaria, and in the restaurant, and I noticed that the owner had the picture of Tito and the picture of the Bulgarian communist president Todor Živkov. And so when I told him I want to take the picture, and he brought another Tito for some reason, I said, well, it's okay, we need only one. No, I want to put it there. So I ended up 2 Titos and 1 Živkov. But I felt I wanted to go back into this political iconography. And this was already some 33 years after Tito's death, and how many years after? 20 years after the fall of communism. And yeah, so this was kind of continuing the work from the Middle East, but now in the Balkans. And again, the same kind of subjects of religious, symbolism, and just a funny juxtaposition of a fun park and a Christian shrine, Christian monument. But like I said, the greens bother me. Can you see everything, David?
Yes, perfectly.
Okay. Just checking that we didn't lose connection. This one was taken in Belgrade, in front of the school of, like the High School of Engineering. And they have this model of a plane. I think it was like, I'm not sure whether it ever flew or not, but I was just trying out different things to see, again, showing the old world, the way I remembered it when I was young. And so I went around the, in those days, this was before all the rail tracks were removed, and you could still find some old trains from the 70s and so on, all very rusty now.
Yeah.
This was a way to kind of make a connection with the Middle East. These were people from Turkey. They would, during the summer months, they return from Germany and Austria. They drive through Serbia, and then they'd stop over at like a petrol station on the highway. And I happened to be on this, just resting in this petrol station, and I saw these people, and I thought, okay, let's try to do like to inverse the, showing people from an Islamic culture here in Serbia. And I managed to get the, if you look at the lower left corner, you see the Mercedes sign, which is kind of something that is almost like a fetish for, especially from people from Turkey. Like, when you come back to Turkey, you have to come back in a Mercedes. Otherwise, what was the point of spending all those years,
Well, of course, to show up. Probably they rent it. Probably they just rent the car, but.
Yeah. And the same thing again, people from Turkey resting. And then I've also found some of these remains of like fun parks of the way they were when I was small.
I will tell you something. In the previous photo, I think that is in this kind of Luna Park that is in Kalamegdan, in the town park, probably.
From where you live. But it's all changed.
Because just there, just there, now they changed it, but the first year when I came here, it was one of these attractions for the kids, that it was from Spain from the early 80s, because they were motorbikes, and they were the drawings and the names of the pilots of the motorbikes, and they were all Spanish from the early 80s. It means, yes, it can remind your child time and also mine.
Yes, well, there you go, you see. Yeah. This one was also taken in a fun park in Zlatibor. And again, it just shows a lot of details there, from this picture of a rabbit.
The little horse or unicorn, I don't know.
There are unicorns, but there's a picture of a rabbit.
Yes, I see on the left, yes. Left.
And this guy didn't know that I was shooting. I was looking at the other way, and the camera was pointed at him, but I think he kind of was wondering, is he taking a photo of me, or is he just standing there? That's the expression that he has. This is funny. I found this in Montenegro, and I called this picture Noah's Ark, because it looks like something that was saved from the flood and taken to safety, like Noah,
I'm sure.
Yeah. Well, it's a nice title. So.
I'm sorry, and a typical Balkan thing: everything on the carpet.
Yes, the carpet, and then you put these funny statues there. But and the different kind of symbolism that you see in these statues, from this monkey, in like red overalls, to a swan, to a donkey, to like these
kind of
mushrooms. Yeah, and the dwarfs are there. The 7 dwarfs are always there. It's crazy. You can buy these, by the way, and
I'm sure.
the side roads if you want. This again reminded me of old Yugoslavia. This is what people would do. Like, they would go on a picnic, and for some strange reason, they want to protect their tires from the sun, and the windscreen. And this was taken, I think, in 2015 or 2016. But the Yugo is still surviving, and somebody's habits have not changed in all these years, because you don't see this anymore. But in the 70s,
I will tell you, I can see this still today in my street in Gospodar Jevremova. You can see this in the summer.
Oh, really? Oh, okay.
Yes. Sometimes the tires also, and for sure the cover, like this one. The only thing that you don't see here in Gospodar Jevremova is the priceless guy that is in the right side of the photo with a big tummy.
Yeah, well, I also noticed him, so I wanted to get both of them in there. I was just going to say the guy with the we call it in Serbia, we say he's got a water heater in his stomach.
Perfect Balkan composition.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I always try to get more than one thing into a frame if I can. And then these were a bit like, I would say, if you took musically, these would be like in minor. These would be like the minor chords, where you kind of are more, let's say, I wouldn't say a sentimental, but there is kind of a mood of like a winter closing in and things shutting down. And this was also taken upon my return within a couple of months. The Sava River and the bridges. And this is I call this one the last train. This was the end of the railway through Belgrade. Now, I think these tracks are still there, but the trains are all gone, and so it was the last train to leave the station, also 2013. So that's the, and I call this series Balkan Jazz, because it's all about improvisation, it's all about spontaneity, and this term Balkan Jazz comes from the famous Serbian jazz trumpeter Duško Gojković, who played with the greats like Miles. I mean, he's alive, but he's, I don't know, 90 years old now. He played with Miles Davis, he played with Dizzy Gillespie and some of the greatest jazz musicians. And he would always throw in some, you know, a tune like from the Balkans and so on. So one of these jazz musicians asked me, so, you know, Duško, what is this music that you're playing? And he said, I'll call it Balkan Jazz, because it's like jazz, but with some volcanic elements thrown in. And for me, it's, you know, the whole thing is about improvisation. It's the jazz of everyday life.
Yeah. And this is the resume of what is in Belgrade and what is in Lebanon, like you told before. This improvisation, like you say, this is the spirit of the life in both areas.
Yes, this is how it is, and this is what I love about both places. And when I spent a few years living in London, London has obviously its advantages, but you always miss this kind of the spontaneity of everyday life. And
yes,
it's good that it's still alive somewhere.
Of course. And let me ask you, can you show us something about your commercial work?
Yes, I can. There's just one series which only has 3 images right now, which I can show you very quickly, which is something that I've been kind of thinking, okay, where do I go next? I'm not so happy with this Vulcan Jazz series, but some people tell me that they like it. Some people, foreigners, tell me that they like it. So I'm not sure, but I was kind of thinking where to go next. And for a long time, I wanted to do something with large format cameras, but now is probably a really bad time to start going into that, because you know, the films are getting expensive. There's fewer and fewer places where you can develop large format films. And so I thought, okay, maybe I can do something with digital cameras, but to treat them like large format cameras, to kind of get that mode of working as if I have a large format camera, but do it digitally. And so, wait a minute, I'm just now lost. Okay, I need to share the screen. So when I traveled to Jordan last year to take part in the Amman Image Festival, I realized how much I miss that part of the world, and I traveled around, but I didn't really go there to do photography. I went there for the exhibition, but I felt that I had to come back and do some photography, landscape photography. And something interesting happened a month later. I got an email from a Dutch government agency for sustainable energy. And first I thought it was a spam, but then I read it again and it seemed real. Somebody from the Dutch embassy in Amman saw my exhibition, and the exhibition was the social landscapes. And they were looking for a photographer, someone to shoot these sustainable energy farms, like projects in the Middle East. And so after looking at a few portfolios of local photographers, they were not happy. And then somebody, like a diplomat from the Dutch embassy who saw my exhibition, said, well, why don't you contact this guy? He seems to be, you know, working well with landscapes. And so, yeah, so we got in touch, and they commissioned me to go to Jordan and to shoot with these windmill farms and the what they call solar panel farms and so on. So I will show you that as part of the commercial work later. But this image I took from that series and put it in a different kind of in a different series, which I now called Largo. And largo is an Italian word which means broad and wide. And so what I really wanted to do was large format landscapes that kind of showed almost like infinite space. So when you enlarge these images to maybe like 1.5 meters by 1 meter something, they become almost like landscape paintings, and almost like huge windows into landscapes that stretch as far as the eye can see. And so this image was kind of like a starting point for a new series. So when I came back to Serbia, I had to go to Vojvodina to shoot something again for the same client, biomass factory. They produce electricity from
biomass. And on the way there, I found this small roadside, I wouldn't call it a monument, but almost like a shrine.
Memorial or whatever, yes.
Yes, and which kind of, again, ties in with all the things that we've seen before, but it also works very well with this image, you know?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Even though the landscapes are completely different. And so, yeah, I mean, this is where I want to go next. I want to go into large formats, and I want to go into landscapes, but with some kind of at least one element made by, showing the presence of humans, you know.
Uh-huh.
And so this prompted me to go back into my archives and look at some of the work which I did when I didn't know how to classify it, where to put it. And I rediscovered this image from 2003, and it was taken in Lebanon, the Bekaa Valley, which is in between two mountain ranges, the Lebanon range and the anti-Lebanon range. The anti-Lebanon range is the one in the background, and that's the border with Syria. And in between is this Bekaa Valley, which was made very famous during the civil war in Lebanon, because all the hashish came from the Bekaa, and still it's a zone where, you know, there's a lot of production of hashish, so you have to be careful when you go there with a camera. But the only thing is that I don't know what to do with it, how to get this picture to work with the others, is because it has no human elements. It's just pure landscape. And so maybe it'll be like a hybrid kind of series where it'll be between landscapes and social landscapes. But this is definitely where I want to go next. It's nothing new, it's nothing original, but I think I'm in that sort of a headspace right now where I just want peace and calm, and I want to create images that open up vistas and create like landscapes of the mind, you know, if that's a way of putting it. Okay. So largo as in Italian word, and that was also used in music to for movements in classical musics that are dignified and slow. So I think especially now, you know, if you look at this in the context of what's been happening in the last couple of months, and with people due to the lockdowns being forced to retreat into their homes and into their heads, maybe they've found like a new peace in some way. So when I was listening to a philosopher earlier this week talk about you know, the new, what did he call it? He called it the, almost like starting a life from scratch, like not going back to the old, but start something new, you know? So I think these kind of landscapes could open up internal dialogues, you know? Uh-huh. Do we want like a slower pace in life? Do we want to stop consuming so much? Do we want to move out, spend more time in nature? I think most people would say yes. And so subconsciously, I probably kind of set the stage for working on a new series that is now becoming more and more relevant, I think, to everyone.
Yes. To take your rest for a while.
Yes. Okay, so that would be, you know, what I've prepared. If anybody wants to see more, there's a couple of other series on my website, which I think you've shared.
Yes, in the Facebook event.
Yeah, and now we can just talk about the commercial work and how that fits into everything that I do. I'd just like to say, you know, to everyone watching, photography and commercial kind of discipline for myself. I always go out and shoot in hope that I will find some meaning, some personal meaning, and in hope that this meaning would carry a universal message, so that other people could relate to it. It was never, I never go out and shoot something that I could sell, you know. I've sold work through galleries and so on, but it was never something that I really was, it was never something that encouraged me to do more, or to start thinking, okay, so if I go out, if I shoot this, then this could be a great image and that could sell well. And, you know, that was never the case. So sometimes when I get invited by somebody to do a commercial work, it always comes, it never comes from me. I never go and tell people, you know, I could do this for you. I always wait to get invited, because people who invite me to do work for them, they see some of the work that I do and they automatically kind of think that it could work with whatever they need. So there's no danger of, you know, tripping up in any way, because I'm not a technical photographer. I'm not an educated photographer. I work with ambient light. I work with modest cameras. I don't know much about lenses. I don't know much about, you know, artificial lighting or anything like that. So I was quite fortunate to work on a few, maybe not many, maybe 7 in the past 15 years. And I will show you 3 of them.
Yes.
So let's go back to mode. Let's close these windows. This first project was done in 2009. It came through my gallerist at the time, who I mentioned, Eli Domit from the Empty Quarter Gallery in Dubai. He was visited by the marketing team of Art Dubai, which is the Dubai Art Fair, which takes place every year in March for the last, I don't know, more than 10 years. And I think it's probably the largest, or maybe the most prominent art fair in the Middle East. And they visited the gallery, and they asked Eli if he could recommend a photographer to work on the campaign for the next years, for 2010. And so he called me and he asked me if I was interested, and they you know, I got in touch with these people and showed them some of the work, and they like it. And so I spent 3 days going around the Emirates with a driver, with a designer from London, looking for locations, and I found a few interesting places. Like this one. This was a desert near Dubai, desert area, and I found this tree which was colored in these colors. I don't know why. It was probably a marker for something. And so this became the let's say the key visual for the 2010 Dubai Art Fair. It was on the catalog, on the posters, and everywhere else. And when it was first shown, somebody called the management of Art Dubai from the Dubai municipality, and they said, "Why did you let your photographer paint this tree?" And they said, "We don't know anything about it." And so they called me and they said, "Did you paint this tree?" I said, "No." I found it. They found it hard to believe that somebody would, you know, there was a painted tree in the middle of the desert, you know. But I never intervene, you know, with images.
Yeah.
If I find something interesting, I take it. This next one was also, it was part of a 4-image series. And I found like a racing track in the desert, where locals would, on the weekends, they would do like karting. And so they put all these tires and they painted them in the colors of the flag, you know, red, white, black. The green is missing, but it's there. And these 3 cables at the top were there. I mean, I didn't put them in. It was just like a
yeah,
you know, it's, electricity cables. And so these worked very well, because the designers wanted something very simple and a lot of space, empty space where they put the text and the sponsor logos. So these worked well.
And for me, it was like a privilege to work on these, on this campaign for Art Dubai, because, for example, a year before me, it was, what do they call those two guys from London, Oliver Chanegrin and one other guy. They're quite a famous photographic duo. So, I was in good company.
Yeah.
So the next project I will show you, is part of the series from Jordan from last year, from summer of 2019. So what I was commissioned to do here was to show windmill farms, because there was a big investment by a Saudi company, something like a $300 million investment, and the Dutch government agency were the technical consultants on this project, and they wanted to put on their website images of these projects that they work on. And so I told them that, the way I work is that I don't, if I take on a project, then I kind of want to do it the way I see it, which is more like editorial photography. So it's not going to be technical, it's going to be editorial. It's going to be kind of as if I was doing it for like National Geographic or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And they were okay with that idea. And so I did a whole series, but I will just show you a couple.
Well, the point is that, like you say in the beginning, if they give you the assignment and they found you because they like your work, they know what you are going to do.
Well, yes, more or less, yeah.
Or more or less, of course. They can imagine what they can expect by your work. Yes,
exactly. So I always try to make the subject of the image, or whatever the commissioned topic is, I want to make it part of a bigger kind of not a bigger picture, but more like I want the images to work on different levels, not just on one. So it's not just going to be a picture of this windmill. It has to be part of a wider context.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I've done a lot of this kind of
solar panels
and so on. But it's interesting, for if there's anybody watching or listening who is at the beginning of their career as a commercial photographer, taking on projects like this, even if they're badly paid, like this project was quite badly paid, because I had to pay all the expenses of travel to Jordan, the hotel, hiring a fixer with a car, and paying the petrol, paying the guys, lunch and everything else. And so I came out with, like 600 euros after spending 5 days in Jordan. And, it's quite badly paid. But what really comes out in the end is that you can get some really nice images, even if you're working on personal projects. You can improve your portfolio. And what's really priceless is the experience that you go through, because sometimes you end up with a task where nobody can help you. You have to find a way to make things happen, within the situation. For example, this place with the solar panels was completely sealed off with barbed wire, and it had a military vehicle parked in front of the main gate with two guys holding a huge machine gun, as if there was an enemy coming any minute now, And so when I got, and I had absolutely no credentials, I had, except my passport, I had nothing. I had no letter or anything, but I knew I had to get inside, So you have to find ways to get in there, even though sometimes it looks impossible. And so sometimes you have to use arrogance, sometimes you have to. So I thought at that moment, okay, I have the army in front of me, so the only way I can do is just be really arrogant and just kind of scare them away in some way. So I got out of the car and I walked up to this guy with a machine gun, and I said, look, I need to talk to the CEO, to the managing director, to the top person.
And he said, why? Well, I need to do some photography, but you know, the only way I cannot discuss this with you. I need to talk to the manager. And he said, okay. And he made a phone call. And 2 minutes later, he said, okay, you can come inside. And he took me to the managing director, and the managing director happened to be a woman. And the whole team, the whole management were women. And they were so kind that they let me do, after like a nice conversation, which took about 15, 20 minutes, where I explained what I'm doing and that I'm really have no permit or anything like that. And that the only way I can do this is if they allow me to. And she said, yes, we can do that, but I shouldn't be doing this, but I trust you. I see that that you are kind of telling me the truth, which I was telling the truth. I told her everything, who I was doing it for and why and so on. And in the end, she said, but I have one condition. I said, yes, what is it? And she said, can you take a group photo of me and my colleagues?
Cool.
And so that was very easy. And so they let me in, and you know, things ended up really well. But it's a great way to sometimes you have to go beyond your what's happening with the okay. Sometimes you have to kind of go beyond beyond your capabilities. You know, sometimes you think there's no way I can do this, and then you tell yourself, no, you can. You can. You have to just find a way.
Yeah.
I'll show you just one more. This is from another place where we couldn't get in. We were supposed to photograph a dam, which was like where the electricity is generated, but these people wouldn't let us in. There were no friendly women there. It was just some guys who were and no military, nothing, just some guys who just
well, and this is a typical military strategic point to bomb.
Yeah, it is because you know Jordan has only a couple of rivers and they all flow into Israel, and there's the whole place is just full of army and everything else, and so I had to get some picture in the end, and I couldn't get close to the dam, so at least I took the picture of the valley of this river, and yeah, so that was that project, and I'll show you just one more, which was also like an incredible commission. It came through a Nigerian contact. Because I did some work for like a construction project in Nigeria, and they recommended me to one of their clients who happens to be like a financial consultant and at the same time a golf enthusiast. So he makes a golf tournament, organizes a golf tournament every year in a small African country called Equatorial Guinea. And I've heard of this country before, but I didn't know anything about it. And it's like the size of Montenegro, and it only has 800,000 people. But it's the fourth exporter of oil in Africa, which means that it's a rich country, but like it always, what happens with African dictatorship, there's like a handful of people get everything and the rest get nothing. But the president of the country happens also to be a golf enthusiast, so he lends his private golf club to this tournament every year, and it's a paradise. So here we go. Equatorial Guinea is the only Spanish former colony in Africa. They speak Spanish and they're Catholics. And there was this huge cathedral built by the president next to his golf course. And the grass is maintained every day, even though nobody ever plays golf there. I mean, maybe like once a week somebody comes there. The president loves golf, but he doesn't play. He does a bit of putting, but nothing else. And so, you know, when this guy asked me to photograph the tournament, I told him, you know, I'm not a sports photographer. I've never taken any photos of golfers, but I can do it, you know, in a way that you know, I know best, which is to do it almost like an editorial style, like for some kind of a Condé Nast Traveler or National Geographic. And these pictures were just not, I mean, I didn't do any retouching. You know, the conditions were perfect, the colors were perfect, the skies were, because it's equator, so that you always have some nice clouds, and the whole setting was just incredible. And it was just about, the only thing that I had to learn very quickly was how to shoot golf players, because you know, it's a very silent game and you're not supposed to press the shutter before they play the shot. So that took a bit of getting used to, and also to anticipate where the ball is going. And then the rest was just really enjoying this beautiful environment. And I went there running, spent both times almost 2 weeks each time. And it was just an incredible experience. And again, it was not a paid job. All the expenses were paid, but what I got in the end was I created like a brochure, which was more like a glossy magazine, which I can show you in a second. And so I managed to get some money out of that. But it was a great opportunity. And this is the last picture, which shows you that decisive moment of the ball, just on the edge of the. But then, you know, the whole shot is framed in such a way, it's like a Tuscan painting.
Frame it, yes.
Renaissance painting from Florence, you know. And just, let me just show you quickly.
Mind the battery.
Sorry?
Mind the battery.
Yes, I will just move to a different place where I can plug this in. And I promise to keep quiet in a second. Let me just show you the magazine. No, but it's not there. Okay, I don't have it, unfortunately. But I can show you the Art Dubai.
Yes, beautiful. This photo is amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, well, and I managed to sell a few of those prints also. And this was more than 10 years ago. So yeah, so some of these things work. Okay, so any questions?
There are no questions. There are just nice words, congratulations, gorgeous, these kind of comments. But there is no any question. I think that the people just was enjoying it with probably mouth open.
Thank you. Well, it's been more than 2 hours, so I'm really sorry for so long. A bit slow, but do you have any questions, David?
No, for me it has been gorgeous. I mean, I am very glad that you show us your work. I know your work. I know that some people more knows your work because this year you apply and you are a member of the ULUPUDS photography section. But like I said in the beginning, not so many people, for different reasons that I mentioned, knows your work, and I think that was a very interesting opportunity to show it. I hope that we will have Belgrade Photo Month this year or the beginning, and we will have at least part of your work in the festival.
Well, I hope so too. Let's hope that we might be able to squeeze something in December.
Yes.
If not next year, and hopefully we'll be able to find a great space like the one we had this year, but unfortunately it's going for redevelopment for the next 2 years, so we won't be able to use it. But
fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed, we might be able to get it in December, or maybe next year we'll find something else, right?
Absolutely. Okay, thank you very much, Siniša.
Thank you, David, and thank you to everyone who's joined us, either live or who will be watching this later. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
See you soon.
Well, it has been a pleasure to be here talking and enjoying the work by Siniša. I just want to say that, well, next week we have more projects. Next week we are going to have on Tuesday. We're going to talk with Dušan D, who is the director of Bratislava Festival, who is one of our partners. That they have to be in Belgrade showing their work, and that we will be in Bratislava in November showing the work of a Serbian photographer. And also next week, after of Bratislava, we'll have the pleasure to talk with Linda from Image Amman Festival, where Siniša was last year, and where we will have also one guest from her festival in Belgrade, and if everything goes well, we will have also Serbian photographer there. Image Amman Festival, it has to be in March because of the Corona, had to be delayed, but they are expecting to be done during this autumn. And then, well, next week she will talk us about, and just don't forget, Tuesday at 8 is the next round. Okay, thank you very much all, and well, see you soon. Bye.